Alrighty, so now that we have the front end started, let's continue with this app and let's get all the back end stuff so it can actually take your messages and do something with it. So we're going to go to server.js, and in between app.use and var server, we're going to do a get request, which basically means here if I type in localhost 3000/messages, it's going to do what I define here. So if they type in /messages, it's going to run a function, and the function is going to have a request and a response parameter. Okay, and then we're going to do the shorthand for function. Okay, remember, this is basically shorthand for function, right? Throwing in those two parameters. Okay, so when I do that, I'm going to take the response and I'm going to send it just a string called hello. That's it. Okay, and now let's test that. All we're doing here is just to make sure that it's working. So I'm going to open up my command prompt. I'm going to go to documents, my folder that I'm in, and I'm going to say nodemon server.js. All right, so I'm monitoring it. It's on port 3000. We can try this. Okay, so there's the home page. That's loading. Good. Now when we type in messages, it says hello. So that's working. We know that when we type in /messages, it's going to run this function, and it's going to put in those two parameters, and we're going to use response.send, and we just printed to the page hello. Okay. All right, now I'm going to create an array that holds the messages so we can make sure it gets passed through. So I'm going to say messages equals, and I'm going to create this array with the square brackets, and inside I'm going to create some objects. So the first object is going to have name, the value is going to be Fred, okay, and it's going to have messages or message, and his message will be I am Fred. And we're just setting this up to test it, basically. So we'll do another one, George, okay, his message is I am George. Okay, and then we'll close out that array. So again, an array of objects with name and message for two different things. Okay, so instead of responding here with hello, I'm going to respond with this array that I just created inside of messages. So I'm going to respond and send messages to the page, which should give us Fred, the name Fred, and the message I am Fred, and the name George, and the message I am George. Okay, so now if we go back to the server here and we refresh, okay, it gives us the object now instead of printing it out. So now we can use this object to kind of start taking our name and messages in the app and actually doing something with them. And now again, remember, it looks like this because I have this plugin here, the JSON formatter. So if you didn't have this, it would look something like this. But it can take, this isn't JSON by the way, but this is, well, I guess it kind of formatted it a little bit into it. But it's also, this is a JavaScript object here as well. Because if it was JSON, this would be in quotes as well. So JavaScript objects and JSON are pretty similar. Okay, so now we're going to update the front end so it'll actually take this data and do something with it. All right, so we're going to head back to index. And I'm going to come down here. And at the end of the code here, I'm going to create a function. And the function is going to be get messages. Okay, and I'm going to use the jQuery get method here. And what we're going to get is the URL where we're going to grab the data and actually do something with it. Well, we know it is found at localhost 3000. messages. Okay, and once we get that data, we're going to run a function. Okay, and we're going to take the data that we get here, because remember, right now, it has this JavaScript object here with these two things here, two objects. So we're going to grab those objects, and we're going to store them inside of data. So we're going to be running a function with that data is what we're doing here. Okay, and so we'll throw that in there. Oh wait, I don't think I did this right. Hold on here. There we go. Okay, so inside of this get, we're just going to say console, because we're just going to test it here, and we're going to log data. And data is going to be, again, remember, all the information it grabs here, stores it inside of data, and then we're just going to log it out and show and take a look at what it looks like there. Okay, so this is a jQuery HTTP GET request, so that's what we're using there. That just helps us go out there and grab the data, or go out there and grab these two objects, store them inside of data, and then we're going to log it out to see what we get. Okay, and so now that we've actually created this, we need to call it. So, and we're going to call it when we click that send button. All right, so we will call it here, get messages. All right, so now we can test this. We're going to go off to localhost here, the home page, and then because we have the monitor running, it should tell us any of the logs of things that happened. So just go back here, refresh this page, see if there's any errors, which looks like there might be. Okay, so we're getting this error saying get is not a function. Get is not a function. Okay, get is not a function. Okay, obviously it doesn't like this jQuery get HTTP request that we're doing here. Now the reason is because if we look up here and we take a look at the jQuery that we're grabbing, it's actually the Slim version. Okay, and that means it doesn't support everything jQuery can do. So if we get rid of Slim and we save it, okay, you got to make sure you're finding the jQuery request, not the CSS requests or the Popper or Bootstrap. Make sure it's jQuery. If we save that and come back, then if we refresh, it should load the real version of jQuery, or the complete version. Okay, and then we're going to click. I forgot another thing. Because we're using a different version of jQuery here, we have to get rid of this integrity value because this only matches up with the Slim version. So we're going to get rid of that. Okay, because I took a look at I was getting a bunch of other errors about valid, failed to find a valid digest and integrity, so the integrity thing was blowing up. So we should be okay now. We got rid of the Slim, we got rid of the integrity attribute. I saved it here. Now let's refresh and take a look. So refresh that. It's still flipping out. Well, actually, I think it's okay now. So I'm going to hit send, comes up. Okay, and that shows up. Okay, so I actually put this in the wrong spot. We want this to happen right outside of here. So just above this function, add message, and in between the send. We just basically want it to run when the page loads. So to test and to see if that works, we're going to come back here. Okay, I'm just going to refresh the page, and I'll hit F12, or you can right click and where is it? Inspect. Now I get this mixed panel error. I don't really need to worry about that. But what I do care about here is this array. So there it is. It passed it into the console. So we can see Fred, I am Fred, George, I am George, length, and it's giving me all the array information. So that's good. That means it's being loaded. Okay, so now we're going to go back here, and we're going to go back to the get messages right here. And we're going to get rid of the console log because we tested it. We know it's working now. I'm going to say data for each. So I'm going to loop through everything inside of that array. Okay, and I'm going to add message here. So every time it goes through each one of these, we're going to be running a function there. So yeah, it'll go to data, it'll loop through everything that's inside of that array, and every time it goes through one of the things inside the array, it will run the function add message, which is right up here. So it will then append that to the page. All right, and the first time it goes through, right, message.name is going to be George, right? The second time it goes through, message.name is going to, well, no, first time that goes through, message.name is going to be Fred. Second time it's going to be George. The first time it goes through, message.message is going to be I am Fred. Second time it's going to be I am George. So it's just going to go, I don't know if it's still up here, but yeah, it'll be going. So message.name will be Fred the first time. Message.message will be I am Fred. Message.name will be George. Message.message will be I am George the second time. So it's just going to loop through those and run the functions here to append them to the page. Okay. Let's make sure all that's saved here. Alrighty. Alright guys, man, I am a horrible teacher. Sorry, my notes that I have here have just not been very good. So, so this is the problem. Right now I have this. Okay, if we come in here and we refresh. Oh, wait. What, now it's working? Oh, I haven't saved it. There we go. So it says add message is not defined. I come in here and it's like, well, yeah, it is. It's right here. But the problem is add message does not get loaded until I click send, right? So I don't want this inside of this send function. So I got to take this whole function add message and it needs to be outside of it. So function add message and function get message are outside of it. Okay, so now I'm going to just move that over so that's in the right spot. Really, all of this stuff doesn't need to be all that far over. Okay, cool. So now I save it, and I'm going to come over here and refresh the page. Don't get any errors this time except for the mix panel. And it puts the objects onto the page. All right, so when I load all of this, okay, it goes to add message. Okay, it runs in here. Okay, and it just runs all the functions that need to be ran. Okay, and kind of the main thing to know here is, remember, this is shorthand for all of this, you know, these things will be ran, all of this stuff will be ran when the page loads. So this is shorthand for the function. Okay, once you click all this, it does this. Okay, it runs this, runs that, so forth. So it runs everything when the page loads. It does the get request, loads everything in data, loops through everything. When it loops through, it runs add message, comes up here, and add message is what actually puts the message on the page. All right, so now we can get messages, and then of course if we come over here and click on it, it should just kind of add to it. Yep, it adds the dude sup. Because when I click on it, it runs all this stuff. So it adds and it creates another object dude and sup, and then runs get messages because now that's been added. Okay, and then it runs get messages and then posts all the stuff. Okay, nice. All right, so let's head back here. So we need to make it so it's now getting messages, it's showing the messages that are there and showing up. Now we need to make it so we can actually post messages. So we're going to go back to server. Let me get rid of this stuff here. Head over to server. Okay, and I'm going to copy this line because what we're going to do is going to be really similar. And we're going to change it to app.post. Okay, when we post the messages, it's going to have a request and a response. Okay, we're going to log it just to make sure it's working. Okay, and I'm going to send status 200. 200 is kind of like the OK status, like, hey, everything worked. Now here's the problem with browsers. Browsers can easily communicate with databases. They can push information to databases or push information to servers, no problem. But servers pushing things back to the browser, just the way the browsers started, that's just something that can't really happen. Or it wasn't able to happen. So they had to create a bunch of plugins and such, and that's why we're going to talk about Socket.io soon. But communication from the server to the browser just is a lot harder to do from browser to the server. And so what we need to do is grab this extension here. So get is fine because get is posting things to the server, not a big deal. It's browser to server communication. But post is server to browser communication, which we can't really log in the browser. We can't really see what happens. So it's kind of lame, but we actually have to have a plugin to be able to kind of see what's going on and make sure that these requests are working. Okay, so server, what's tough is the servers can't really send post requests to the browser. That's kind of the problem here. But the backend just can't really send them to the browser. So we're going to need a thing called Postman. So I'm going to click here, go to setting, or more tools, extensions. Scroll down to the bottom. This is what we're trying to get, Postman. Couldn't find an easy way to get this, so I'll show you what I did. I went to get more extensions, did a search for Postman, and I installed this Postman interceptor. So you want to hit add to Chrome and it'll put it there. Once it's there, you'll see it up here, and I'm going to click on it, and then I want the Postman Chrome app. So you'll click on that, and then you will install that as well. So once that's done, we're going to launch it. Okay, and what we're going to do here is just create a basic request. We don't really need to give it a name, so I'm just going to hit cancel here. Okay, and I've already kind of done this, so you're already going to see some things here. So I'll just hit clear all, delete that. All right, so once you're in here, what you're going to do is click on this drop down, and we're going to do a post request. Okay, the URL that it's happening from is localhost, just like I have here. Okay, so localhost 3000 messages, so that's where this post request is going to come from. Okay, and we're going to, let's see, where is it? All right, so once we have that, we have post, we're going to come over here to body, and we're going to say raw. It's going to be raw data that we're going to be getting, and the type is going to be JSON. Okay, and now we're going to type in the data that we're going to send from the server to the browser. This is just to make sure that this works. So I'm going to do a curly bracket here, and I'm going to say, and this is going to be JSON, so we have to do it in correct JSON format. So it's in quotes. The key and the value are both in quotes here. So name is going to be Fred, like usual, okay, comma, and then the message that Fred is going to send is going to be hey from Postman. So we know that this thing is coming from Postman. Okay. So once that's in there, we should be able to say send. Okay, and what this does is it goes out to localhost 3000 messages and it posts this JSON data to our app. And then if we get a status down here of 200 OK, then we should know that it works. Now we have here, well, let's see if it worked. Okay, now we're going to come over here to NodeMon. You got to make sure that NodeMon was running. We get this thing called undefined. Because what happened is a post request just came from Postman, right? Let's get rid of this. So when I sent this, when I hit sent, basically it went out to messages and it posted a post message, went out to messages, and so it logged the body of the request. Okay, and then it sent the status of 200. So if we look in here, when it was logging that console, it made it undefined. So the information did not get passed correctly. Okay, it's undefined because Express doesn't have a way. Remember, Express is kind of the server stuff that we're using. It doesn't have a way to parse that data. Okay, so we have to install a package that can take this JSON data that's getting sent from Postman and parse it so we can actually use it. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So we need to come back here and stop this server. So I did Control C. Okay, and I'm back in here. Okay, and I'm going to install npm, so Node Package Manager. I'm going to install -s. Remember, we're doing that, so it puts it in our package.json file. I'm going to install body parser. Okay, and hit enter. Okay, I think I already had it there, so it's updating it. So we should be good there. Okay, so now it's installed. We're going to put it in our code. We're going to require it here. So I'm going to go up here and we'll say var body parser is going to be equal to require body parser. Again, this is just going to allow us to take that JSON data, parse it, and actually be able to use it. Okay, and then under this app.use line, we need to tell it to use it as well. So app.use body parser .json. Okay, and what this is doing is it's telling body parser, hey, the data that's going to be coming to you is going to be JSON. So use your JSON magical powers to parse it and do what you need to do with it. Okay, so it's just letting it know what's going to be coming from Postman and also what's going to be coming from from Postman, and then also what's going to be coming from our app is going to be JSON data, and that's how it's going to use it. Okay, so let's test it again now that we have the parser stuff set up. So nodemon server.js. Okay, it's running. So now we should be able to go back to Postman here, and we're going to send that request again. So I'm going to hit send. Okay, send it again. Gave us a status of 200, which is good. Come over here, and boom, there we go. Now it's parsing it into something that we can use. It's giving us name Fred, and then the message is hey from Postman. So we know it's working, and now we're actually going to be able to pull out that data and use it. Okay, so now that we know the backend can send post requests and the front end can receive them, we're going to use those messages. Right? So we'll go back to server here. Okay, and we're going to come over here and we're going to get rid of the console because we don't need to log that anymore now that we know that it's working. I'm going to put in messages dot push the body here. So instead of logging that request, the body of the request, I'm going to be pushing it. If you know anything about arrays, pushing something to an array is basically just adding something into it at the end. Or at the beginning, I'm not sure, I can't remember which one, but this push method here, what that's going to do is take this array that we've created up here, and it's going to grab it from the server, whatever's on the server, and it's just going to add on to it. Okay. Okay, so now instead of getting messages from Postman, which are fake, right, we can get rid of that. We got to get them from the actual server. So we're going to head over to index. Okay, and then we're going to do the get messages function here. We're going to just create another function underneath it. So make sure it's not inside of any function, it's its own. So we're going to call it post messages. Okay, so remember the get messages. Okay, that just kind of displays everything that exists. This post messages is going to be getting the messages from the server. Oops. All right, so it's going to grab the data, store it inside a message here. Okay, going to grab whatever is giving it, whatever the server is giving it, and it's going to store it inside a message. Okay, now just like there's a get jQuery function, there's a post as well, and we're going to use that. Okay, and this is going to be from localhost as well. Okay, and it's going to grab message, store it inside a message, okay, and then it's going to run a function. Now, I don't know, to me, the easiest way to understand this is there's the two-way communication, right? You have browser to server, which is get, and then you have server to browser, which is post. And the server to browser is the little trickier one, okay? So I'm going to do kind of the same thing. Okay, I'm going to take the data from the server, right, the information that the server gets to me, and I'm going to loop through it as well. Okay, and every time I loop through it, I'm going to add it to the message as well, so it can append it to the page. Okay. All right. Happy days, right? The main difference here is, it's just grabbing whatever the browser is sending to the server, and then it's looping through. And here, it's receiving what the server gave to the browser inside a message here, passes it along to data, and then it loops through the data and then adds it to the page. Okay, now we need to come back here and get rid of this stuff. Okay, and now we need to kind of mess with this form a little bit to make it so it receives a name and a message, and it has IDs and such, so we can pull all that data from there. So we got to hop back. Well, I think we already are. We're inside of index here. Okay, and I'm going to see what we got here. So this is the name, right? So I'm just going to mess with this a little bit. So I'm going to give it an ID. The ID is going to be name because that's what it is. Okay, that's really all we need to do there. And now I need to create a text area because this is going to contain our message. And the text area is going to have an ID of message. Okay, and we want to have it have the same class as the other one that's getting pulled from Bootstrap. Okay, and the placeholder is just going to be message. Okay, and I'm going to throw a break tag here. Save that. Okay, now when we refresh, we have name and message and send. And they both have IDs. They have ID of message and ID of name. So we can call it with the JavaScript, pull the information that they put in there, and then start making the communication happen. All right, so we should be good now with the form. Now, of course, we have a problem here. When we click send, it adds message, which is great, but it'll only add dude and what's up. So we don't really want that. We want it to go out to the form, grab whatever was put inside of name, right, and grab whatever was put inside of message, and then put that to the page. So we have to kind of mess with this, and so we're going to get rid of dude here. Okay, so the name is going to be what was put inside the form, and the way we can select that with jQuery is use these selectors. So the ID of name, okay, and what we're pulling from them is the value. Okay, so basically the value of the text box with the ID of name is all that's saying there. Okay, and we need to do the same thing here. So get rid of sup, use the jQuery selector, message dot val. Now that we have that, we're going to save this inside of a variable here. Okay, so far message is going to be equal to, and it's just going to be equal to this object here. Okay, so we don't need all that extra stuff. Okay, we're storing it in that variable because down here we're going to run the function called post messages, and we're going to pass message to it. All right, so let's kind of take a look at what we did here. It's nothing too crazy. So instead of posting that predefined name and message, when we click on send, okay, it's going to set up a new variable called message. Inside of it, it's going to say, all right, the value of name is going to be whatever they typed inside of the text box. Okay, well, the message is going to be whatever they typed inside the message text box. Okay, and then it's going to run the function post messages and pass along the name and the message that they just typed in that's stored inside a message here. So it's going to run post messages, so it's going to come down here. It's going to pass what they typed in into message. Okay, and then it's going to do the post request. Okay, and then it's going to pass all that message out there, and then it's going to add it to the page. Okay, if you may be wondering, well, isn't that browser communicating to the server? Well, yeah, kind of, except for it goes out there and it posts the message, and then the server has to kind of give it back. So that's kind of the main difference here. Get is just when it loads, right? It just goes out there and it gets the messages that are kind of already existed. And plus, we're going to be using the server later to post this to a database and such. So this is why we're using post messages instead of get. So get is kind of grabbing things that already exist, right? And then post is actually going out there posting it, and then the server is then returning that to the browser. Just how it works, people. Okay, so now that we have that set up, we need to mess with post messages a little bit. Okay, so really all we need to do is we don't really need to loop through this anymore. I can just get rid of this, get rid of all this. Okay, and this is just kind of the shorter method that it's going to receive the inputted object from the server. Okay, so it'll run it, it'll pass messages into it, it's going to post the information, so it'll grab the information from the server, from here, from this URL, okay, and then it'll be able to post it and add it there. So really kind of the main difference here is this is basically only pulling from the server. It receives the user inputted objects from the server. Okay, and then this is getting them and then displaying them on the page. All right, so let's test this out. Okay, so it pulls those, which is good. Type in Dave, see if we get any errors or anything. All right, so the way we test this, right, is I'm going to do this. I kind of already hit send. Now, if you refresh the page, they'll show up. But the problem is they're as undefined. So I can type this in, hit send. They're not showing up yet. You have to hit refresh to actually view it. And I'm getting all of these undefined ones, which, you know, we don't like. And that's giving us some issues with the body parser. It's not parsing the way it should. So what comes from the browser is URL encoded. In other words, it's encoded so it can't read it. So we have to tell the body parser to use the user submitted info, right? We have to tell it to basically not encode it so it can use it. So we're going to come back here where we say app.use inside a server. We're going to say, hold on, let me check my notes here. All right, so we just need to tell it to app.use. We're going to define body parser again, but we need to tell it to the URL encoded. Extended false. Okay, now that will tell it to not encode. Okay, so I refresh and I can say, you know, Dave, hey, we send, we refresh. Okay, and then there it is, it's working and it's showing up the way it should. So, Dave, hey. All right, so it's starting to work the way it should. Obviously, there needs to be better communications. You shouldn't have to refresh to see the messages, but you know, this is starting to work at least the way it should. If we had someone else come in, actually, I'm not really sure if this, yeah, it'll show up. So if someone else were to join this, they would see the messages and so forth. But the minute we turn off the server and refresh, all of this stuff is going to be gone. And also, like I said, it's kind of annoying. We got to type stuff in, hit send. It doesn't show up until we refresh the page. That isn't working the way we want it to. So that's where Sockets.io comes in. That's where it's going to make the communication between the browser and the server to the browser kind of all-encompassing and just automatically updates. When someone sends a message, it'll automatically update it on everybody's site so they can see that new message without having to refresh. Okay. Like we've talked about a bunch, you know, we're able to send requests from the browser to Node, right, the browser to the server, but not in reverse. Okay, and especially we don't have a way to have the server send a message back and then have it refresh the page automatically. So that's where sockets.io is amazing, and it's going to be able to help us out. All right, so we need to install it. So we're going to head over to the command prompt. I'm going to get out of the server here. So npm install -s, so it puts it in the packages file, socket.io. Okay, so it should install it. Okay, and now we need to get Express, which is our server, to work with Socket.io. Okay, and we're going to do this by using an HTTP server. Right now, we're just kind of using the node server that it gives us. You know, we're using it all inside of app here. We're using this Express server inside of app, but that isn't going to work with Socket. All right, so what we need to do is come up here, and I'm going to set up another variable called HTTP. And I'm going to require HTTP. We're going to create that server, and it's going to be using the app that we created inside that server. Okay, and then the next one we're going to set up is IO. We got to require that and put in the sockets IO library as well. So that's going to be socket.io, and we are going to tell it to use the HTTP server. So you can see here, like now that we've created this HTTP server, we're now hooking it up to socket.io by doing it right here and kind of feeding that server into it. Okay, so it's pretty simple. That's how you kind of set it up on the back end, kind of hook those two together. Now we need to do it on the front end. So I'm going to head over to index. Okay, and now we need to embed the socket library. So we're going to do that with a script tag. So script source equals, it's going to be socket.io, socket.io.js. Now again, Node's smart enough to know that this is going to be a package, so it's going to go out there and find it. So if you can't make the connection here inside your folder, that's fine. Remember, like when I come in here, there is no socket.io folder, right? It's smart enough to go out there and find it. Oops, we're not in Node test, we're in Node chat. Okay, so it's smart enough to know exactly where this stuff is. All right, so now if we try to run it here, say again, node mon. If I kind of refresh here. Okay, we're going to get an error. Failure to load research. The server responded with the status 404 socket.io.js. It's given me errors. It's not finding it. Okay, it's mainly because we can't provide our backend with files using Express anymore. All right, because up here we've kind of said, all right, we're not really doing Express anymore. We're going to be using this HTTP server. So now we're going to use the HTTP server we just created. That way Express and Socket will both be running and we'll be able to use both. All right, so we're going to go back into server.js. Okay, and then we have the app listen, right? So now instead of it using app, which is the Express, we need it to use the HTTP server that we just set up. So http.listen. Okay, and that's really all we need to change there. And now we're going to be, that basically makes it so we use the HTTP server so we can use Express and Socket at the same time. All right, so now if we come back here and refresh, the error went away. Mix panel's still there, but we don't care. Okay, but the socket IO is gone because now we're using it. All right, so now we got to basically initialize socket. In other words, turn the key, get it running. Okay, so we're going to go into server. Just kidding, we're going into index. And right at the top of our script tag, we're going to put here, and we're going to say var socket is equal to IO parentheses. So that'll initialize it. That basically turns it on, makes it start. This is going to try and make a connection to the socket server at the same time the URL that the current page is being hosted on. Okay, so it's going to make it's going to try to make a connection to that socket IO server at the same time the URL is being loaded. So just try to make that connection. Okay, so now we need a callback for the socket connection, so it'll know when a new user connects, because we need to be able to know that and see when new people come up and start posting messages and such. Okay, so we're going to go back to server. Okay, and right underneath this app.post, we're going to put io.on. So now we're doing socket stuff. Okay, connection, socket, running this function. We're going to say console.log. I'll say a new user connected. Now this is kind of interesting what you can do with socket. With socket.io you can create your own events. So I just created an event called connection. Okay, so when this connection event happens, it's going to log, hey, a new user has connected. All right. So this is, this event here is just checking to see if there's been any connections. If there has been a connection, it'll say, hey, a new user connected. Then when someone else connects, it'll detect that connection, and then it'll say, hey, this person has connected as well. So now if we come back here and kind of refresh, okay, we get inside of our NodeMon a new user connected. So we know that's working now. Okay, so now we need to submit an event for the server, from the server, to all the clients, letting them know that a new message has happened. So if I type in a name and a message and I hit send, well, it needs to then alert everyone else who's connected so they can see that message as well without having to refresh their page. All right, so we'll head back here. So we have our app.post. So right under this, the messages.push, we're going to do IO emit. So what we're doing here now is we're actually creating our own kind of custom event with Socket.io, and then we're admitting it. In other words, we're broadcasting it out to everyone. And this event that we're creating is called message. And what's going to be stored inside this event is the body of the request. In other words, the message that they've written. Okay. And this again is when they go to the post page, right? It's going to admit that, hey, there's this message, and it's going to admit it out to everyone, and it's going to hold the message. All right. And that's when they go to the messages page, right? Is when they go out there to pull all the messages. All right, so sure I'm recording there. So outside of the document ready function, just right above add messages, we're going to create another event handler. So socket.on, so message. we're going to run the function add message. So what that's saying here is when we come back to the server, we say, okay, we've created this. Where did it go? Yeah, we've admitted this event called messages or message. We've emitted it out. So then it comes out here, and when it catches that, it goes, oh, okay, when message happens, when someone posts a message, we're going to run add message. So if someone that I'm chatting with posts a message, it emits that event called message. My browser will detect that, and then it'll run add message again, which is going to show me all the messages that have been posted. So that's how Socket gets all these multiple things working together. Is it creates, it emits its own little event here. Once that event happens, it registers it, and then it runs whatever function to show all the messages plus that message that has just been added. All right. Okay. Now we can test it out. I'm going to refresh here. We got the two that are put in there from where is it? Right here, messages. Okay, so those go down. I'm going to say Dave, hey, from Socket, hit send. Okay, and it just posted it. I didn't have to refresh. All right, so we should probably walk through it, one more time, and then we'll move on. So here's the home page, right? I load it, it kind of turns on Socket, gets it going, gets it started. Okay, this doesn't happen yet because this only happens when we click. Okay, it looks for that message sent out or admitted out by Socket. It doesn't exist, so it doesn't do anything. It runs the function add message. So it goes out to the ID of messages, right? And then it puts all the messages that exist. Okay, which comes over here, right? We have this variable called messages. Okay, and then we have Fred and George. I'm Fred, I'm George in there. Okay. And that's what it does. It goes out there and it gets all that information from messages. Because remember, if we type in messages here, this gives us, it sets up that object that it pulls. So it goes out there, grabs all the messages, stores them inside of data, goes through all of them, okay, and then it'll display them all to the page. Then anything it can pull from the server, it goes out there and grabs it. But we haven't posted anything yet. Post doesn't happen until we actually click on something. Remember, when we click on something, then it runs post messages, which is down here, posts it out to messages, and then it adds to that object. Okay. All right, so then we have all the stuff that we're using in here. Okay, messages, it sets up that messages object, that array with a couple of objects in there. Okay, whenever you type in messages, it's going to set what's in there. Then when you post something, it gets out there and it puts it onto the existing array with all the messages and names in there. It creates that message object, or the message, not object, but event. Okay, emits it out there, message, remember, and then it comes up here and it's like, okay, when message happens, I'm going to add that message. I'm going to run the function add message, which will then put it onto the page. Okay, and then it comes back with the OK status, and then it logs whenever a new user has connected, and then of course this logs what address and port we're using, and that's what happens in here. All right, cool. So for the most part, it's working now. So I can come in here. I don't know really any other names besides Fred and George, it seems. Julie. Julie comes in and says, hey, I'm Julie. She hits send. And boom, it's in there. and then somebody else joins, right? And they come in and they're like, oh, cool, there's Julie. So Julie's here, and his name is Mark. Hey, Julie, nice to see you. Hit send. It's there. Julie's over here hanging out, and oh, she just sees that Mark just made a message. So that's where Socket.io comes in, and it's really powerful. It's able to have the server communicate with the browser, and it goes both ways. So when someone makes a message and stuff, it's just going to automatically post instead of them having to refresh. So if your chat's doing this, great. You're on your way. I'm going to stop for now, and we'll continue in the next video. So have fun, guys. See ya.